his father was a Methodist minister, so all their life they travelled like 3 years in each place, so they travelled all over England, and it was in Wales actually that he met my mother, who was teaching in Wales at the time. And yeah, so I think he was actually born in Oxford, but they did travel a lot.
So what do you remember about your mother?
Well, she was born in Yorkshire, in Macclesfield, and she went to, her father was a school teacher too, and both her brothers were school teachers, and she went to Cambridge, got her degree in Cambridge in the years when women weren't supposed to have education, and she taught in schools in England and went across to Llanelli in Wales, and that's where they met.
So the family came across well before the kids were born?
Oh yes, well he came across, my mother was in England and she couldn't come out because of the war, 1914-18 war, so they got engaged by letter, I suppose, and she came out, the first boat that came out after the war, so she came out in 1919, and they were married in 1920.
So how on earth did you end up on an orchard? Because your father was an architect, wasn't he?
Yes, well he was an architect in England, and in his early 20s he had a kidney removed, and the doctor suggested that there was a good thing to get out and get a fresh air job, and he decided Australia was the place, and orcharding was something that he felt he could do.
So what do you remember about your father?
Well, he wasn't really a man of the land. He was really his education made him, he could have done something probably better, but he was outdoors and that's what he wanted, and he lived till he was 82, so the outdoor life must have been a good thing for him.
Did he actually use his architecture?
He designed a few things at the church at Tyab, and his brother came out from England, Dr. Floyd, and he designed his house in Toorak, and an odd house for a friend or something, but he didn't really do. The orchard was full-time work.
So what was it like being raised by your mother, who was, was she a feminist? Was she?
Yes, well, because they moved down to Tyab, to the orchard there, and most of the people had been orchard hands and things, so that she was, superintendent of the Sunday school, and she used to play the organ at the church, and she was secretary of the Mothers Club and things like that, but she had that little bit more, perhaps, education than some of the locals.
Where did you go to school?
Well, first of all, we went to the local school, as I say, which was 2 miles away. We walked. We picked up other people's kids on the way, and the girls over the road. I used to go. Actually, at every July it used to be Arbor Day, and the mothers used to come along and we used to plant trees and things, and because my brother was 2 years older than me, we went to this day, and my birthday was in July as well, and I'd just turned 5. So, and the headmaster said, would you like to come to school? And I said, yes, that'd be good. So in those days you didn't have preppies or anything. So I did the first half year, then the next year I went into grade 2. So that I was always a lot younger than most of the other kids there. But we used to have good fun walking to school. It took us quite a while. We used to cut across the paddocks and have a look at birds' nests and things on the way, and eat a lot of gum off the trees and mistletoe berries, and now I realise that we were probably digging up orchids and eating the tubers, and there again, people would be horrified to think that, but I think it was a good thing that we, on Sundays we walked to church, and that took up most of the time. Then when I got to the 6th grade, we went to high school, went to Frankston High, and in those days there was only, in the peninsula, in our sports, like I always played hockey and things like that, there was Frankston, Mordialloc and Dandenong were the only high schools in that whole area, and we used to go on the train there. I think I said before, we had to catch the we left home at 7:15 to catch the 7:45 train from Stony Point to Frankston, and after school, because there was only 2 trains a day, so we had to, after school, we were allowed to go out and play for an hour or half an hour or something, and then we had to go to late class, and there was one of the teachers used to have to stay back with us, and so we did all our homework organised after school, and then we caught the train home at 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever it was, but by the time we got home we just had tea and went to bed, because we'd done our homework, and but we had a good time after school. We'd always play table tennis or bat tennis or something, and there was only, might have only been a dozen of us, but the teacher had to stay back with us, because as I say, there was the only school on the peninsula was Frankston, and the railway line went to Baxter, and then one lot went over to Mornington, and then our one went to Stony Point, where the Flinders Naval Depot had, was down that end, so there was always a sailor's train that we could get on. And the bus came up from Portsea, collected people at Rosebud, Dromana, Bonio, those sort of places. So now, there'll be dozens of high schools in that area.
So in your household, what sort of technology did you have growing up?
Well, back to Tyab days, we didn't have power, we didn't have water. We always had telephone. We had Aladdin lamps, which were, because my parents both were avid readers, and so after You know, when the sun went down, well, they came in, they were tired after being out in the orchard, and they used to read a lot of books. My uncle gave them a subscription to the Melbourne Athenaeum, and they used to go down to the railway station and pick up bundles of books that they, every fortnight or so, they'd get these books. And as I said before, Granddaddy wasn't a technical person in any way. We never had a car. We had bikes, and we lived 2 miles away from the station and the shops. In the early days, we used to have to go and get our own mail from the post office. Then later on, we had a postman. It was a big event when the postman used to come around, and if we really needed to get anything, we had the horse and cart. And in the very early days, I think we had a jinker, which was a lighter version, but I think the horse was always a bit flighty, and I think it tipped us all out one day, and that was the end of the jinker era. So we had the old plough horse, and he just trotted along with to pick up the fruit, and we had a man who used to send our fruit to the market, and he used to take to the apples and pears to the Victoria Market, and also Mum used to do the packing down the shed, and I think she was quite happy to do that.
So tell me a little bit about your brother. What was your brother like to grow up with? Did he pick on you like all brothers?
Yeah, he was always very protective of his little sister, I think, because I was shy and he was, well, 2 years older and a boy. He was pretty good at school. When he went to high school, he won the citizenship prize, which was both academic and sports. He was always in the football team and the cricket team and the athletics team. And when he got to the sixth form, which was, we called them A at that stage, when the first year at high school was F. You went up FED, you know. And when he got to, went back for this, well, the 6th year, the headmaster suggested that he should, the fellow from the Mornington Shire office wanted a junior clerk over there, and he decided that, Charles had decided that, you know, orcharding wasn't for him because we were, you know, never had any money, and so he did a commercial course and the accounting and so forth, and this fella from the Mornington Shire office came over to the headmaster and said, you know, could you recommend anybody? And so he recommended Charles, and they came down, and it's a sort of, you know, the different era. They came down to our place and asked Dad, would, you know, whether he, you know, could be employed there. So he did that, and he was junior clerk over at Mornington. He used to ride over on his push bike 12 miles a day, and then in the winter time he boarded over with the lady over in Mornington, but the rest of the time he used to come home every night, and so they could go to cricket practice, and he was wicket keeper and opening bat and whatever. Then he outgrew that junior clerk business, and he was this assistant rate collector at St Kilda, and he was there when the war started, and he decided that he'd like to join the Air Force, so he did that, and he went to did his training course at Summers and then Benalla, I think, and then back to Point Cook, and he was killed in a plane crash. And he was only 20.
Gosh, it's so young. Do they know, was it technical failure or?
No, well, I think they did have an inquest or whatever, and they said it couldn't be decided whether it was engine failure or pilot's failure or whatever. So we never knew.
So, all right, let's move on to a little bit about when you first met Grandpa. How old were you, and how did you meet him?
Well, because I'd come from a long line of school teachers, I think I knew I didn't want to work in an office, and so I just automatically decided to be a school teacher, and we went out and did the days when you had student teachers. We did a couple of years out in a school before you went to Teachers College, and I got Hastings, which is the next door to Tyab, and I used to ride the bike down to school, and after I'd done a bit over a year, I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do, so I did a course in calculating machines, and we used to do wages and cost plus system when the engineering firm where I worked, and my husband was to be. He worked a Kearns borer out in the factory, and I was working in the office doing the wages and that sort of thing. And we went out as a group, some of the fellas and the girls in the office, and then it continued on.
So what was Grandpa like?
What was he like? Because he was an only child, he was very, his mother was very protective, and he was very shy, I suppose, in lots of ways, but he tried to prove that he was good. He wasn't allowed to go swimming in case he got drowned, and it was good to get out and have a family and make a life for himself.
Tell me about the motorbike.
Well, again, it was wartime, of course, when we got married in. Yeah, well, Alan was born in 43. We got married in 42. Yeah, and because of petrol was rationing, we had an old A model Ford. We got the petrol coupons to for the car, and then he had a motorbike too. So he'd always had a motorbike in his teenage years, or 18, I suppose, whenever you were allowed to. And he used to drive from Warrandyte to Abbotsford to the workshop, and yeah, so he could do a lot more miles with the motorbike. That's what I'm getting at. And
So,
at that stage, I lived at my parents lived at Tyab, so he used to come down, take me down on the motorbike, or when he could, and that was an easy way to get round.
what did your parents think when he rocked up to collect you on a motorcycle?
Well, my father, who wasn't a mechanical person in any way, we never had a car, and he used to hop on the back of the motorbike if he wanted to post a letter, or he used to write a lot of letters. That was part of his stock in trade.
What was it like for you during the wartime? Like, tell me why Grandpa didn't go to war.
Well, he was in essential industry. Most of the people, at one stage there, he and a group of people from the workshop went in and tried to enlist, but they filled in the papers, but then they were sent home because it was essential that they kept doing their work.
Tell me about this wood chopping competition.
Well, because when we first got married in those years, South Warrandyte was a fairly rural sort of area, and they didn't have a sports ground. If you wanted to play, I think Alan played footy for Warrandyte, but South Warrandyte didn't have anything, and some of the locals decided that they'd buy a block of land with the help of the council, I think, and all the fellas with their tractors, and we had at that stage a grey Fergie, and I think about half a dozen fellas all built this sports ground. Alan was a teenager, he did his stint with that, and they also built later on a tennis court, and some of the locals just wanted the old asphalt like they used to have in their youth, but I think Dad persuaded them that on-to-car was the way to go, and to raise money to do this, we had a big opening of the sports ground, and the kids had decorated bikes and things like that, and foot races and all sorts of things, and they had a men's wood shop, and I don't know who won that, but then they had the ladies' wood shop, and they had all the axes in a barrel, and we just went up and picked out a good-looking axe, and yeah, I won the wood shop.
And what did Grandpa think of that?
Yeah.
Or Bill, I should say.
They didn't. Well, he belonged to the era where the men did the wood chopping and the mowing the lawns and all that sort of thing. I was never allowed to do anything like that because that was men's work. But all the locals laughed. They thought it was a huge joke that I should win the wood shop.
So, when you married Grandpa, tell me what the progression was with houses. Like, where did you go straight into a family home, or?
No, well, there again, it was wartime. We had a bed sitter in Armidale, and but after a short while, he realised that there was too much time to spare and nothing to do, and his parents had a property at Warrandyte, so we stayed there for a while and then moved up to South Warrandyte and stayed with his parents for a few years or a short time, and then he built a small house, and we moved in there. Then he built the house that we lived in all our married life.
So when you first moved into the house that you lived in for most of your married life, what did you do on that property? Was it?
Well, first of all, we had cherries, and that was just a sort of a part-time job. Well, a bit more money, but we used to grow a few chryses and violets, things like that they used to sell on the side of the road.
And then what eventually you bought or made Chalker happen? Tell me a little bit about the nursery, and how on earth did you come up with this idea to have a native plant nursery on your property?
Well, in 1960 we started with Jack Hyatt, who was a friend, the Ringwood Fieldettes Club, and through that we met Fred Rogers, who was a foundation member as well, and we decided to plant a native garden, and through that we found the liking to native plants. And although Dad was an engineer and a good one, this was, the children had all flown the coop, and we thought we didn't need so much money, so he came home and we spent quite a few years together with a native plant nursery.
You had a big family. Was that something that you always knew you were going to do, or?
Well, because my brother had been killed during the war, we were loners, and our children never had any aunties, uncles, cousins, and we thought it would be a good thing to populate our parish, which was a thing at that time of the globe.
So how was it raising 5 kids? Was it hectic? Was it?
Well, because Bill was earning what at that stage was a good wage, and the wife stayed at home, and we washed on a Monday and we ironed on a Tuesday, and it was a good thing to do, I think. So I was quite happy we always had the weekends off, and we always had good camping holidays. After Bill left the Marfleet and Waite, the marine engineering shop, he moved to a workshop in Auburn, and because he managed the workshop there, they always needed him, so he was only allowed to he had his 3 weeks holiday, but we always had school holidays. We had each holiday with the weekend at each end, so we were able to go to places like Buchan. We always went to Buchan at Christmas time. We went to Hatter a lot. We went to Wobberfield, Pink Lakes, Grampians. We always had at least those 3 holidays when the school had 3 terms, and not so much, and Easter or any odd time or a weekend. Yeah, we did that.
So you were always quite outdoorsy people, both of you?
Yes, yeah, well, always growing up at Tybe, which was fruit growing area mainly, but there was a lot of bush paddocks, and I was always interested in the orchids. We spent all our days, all our weekends with the girls over the road, going out in the bush and picking bunches of orchids and things.
You get arrested for that now, don't you, Grandma?
Yeah, and killing snakes and things like that you're not allowed to do anymore.
Just give me a summary of your kids. So first along came Dad. Tell me just a little bit about the 5 kids.
Well, Alan always wanted to be a draftsman. I think he started off being a draftsman. Robert always wanted to be a school teacher. He'd decided, a little country school like we had at South Warrandyte he enjoyed the stories of travel around to different country towns. One school teacher we had had come from the Mallee, and he talked to me about witchy proof when the train ran down the middle of the road and this sort of thing. And it wasn't until later on that when he went to uni and found out that he would prefer to he did majored in botany and zoology, and the lecturer at that time said that he was could stay on, and brought him out of the education system. Then Margaret did a series of things. She worked at a nursery for a while, and then she went to worked in the zoology department at the uni for a while, and then she got married. She married an orchardist. Then Alison wasn't too sure what she wanted to do, but she did mothercraft nursing. And then Jenny always wanted to be a hairdresser, so she did that.
Beautiful.
So that everybody was quite happy at the time.
So after your parents retired from the orchard, where did they go? What did you do?
Yeah, well, because I was the only child, and we had at that stage 2 little grandsons, or they had 2 little grandsons. They'd always liked the Dandenongs. They decided to come and live in Ringwood to be more or less near to South Warrandyte, and I think Granddaddy thought the air was clear up near the mountains, and we had friends who had a little hut at Montrose, and they used to come up there for weekends and liked the area a lot. So when they came to Ringwood, Granddaddy did a lot of writing letters that he wrote to the paper and congratulated people on anything that they'd done that he thought was worth. And he'd also write to them if he didn't approve of what they were doing. And her mother joined the choir in Ringwood because she come from a family of musical people, and she went down to the Ringwood Church. I think she was always in the choir there. She used to sing alto, and there were always plenty of sopranos, but not people that could hold a part. Then when North Ringwood United Methodist Church started up here, she also joined the Women's Fellowship, and then she was communion steward, and took a great interest in the church, all the church things, and especially the choir. No, well, anybody that had done anything, he'd always see the good side in people, and he would think it was important that other people should know. For the local paper, he used to write articles for that. And after they came up here, his brother, who was Dr. A.E. Floyd, and used to come up for a trip to the country, because Ringwood was more a country town. My mum and dad's house was one of the first in Warrandyte Road, but now it's chock-a-block full of houses and units and so forth. But Uncle Alfred was the organist at St Paul's Cathedral, and he'd come out from England and had his family in Toorak, and it was good to have. They were the only relations we had in Australia, when other people had, lots of cousins and aunties and uncles. Ours were all Oh, we kept in touch with the people in England, but it's not quite the same as having somebody you can visit on a Sunday afternoon.
So tell me, just give me the highlights of your family now. Like, how many are there?
Well, I had 5 children and 15 grandchildren and 20 great-grandchildren, and we had a family picnic last year, the year before, up at Winnicky Dam, and we had a good photo taken with everybody sitting on an old tree. And it was good to see everybody. There was only a handful of people that weren't able to come on that day.
Tell me about this birthday you've just had.
Well, I'm now 99, and I've just been down to Phillip Island with the family. We had a lovely time visiting the places, the Swan Lake, Churchill Island, down to the Nobbies and the Seal Rocks. And for my birthday, I had a lot of cards from all sorts of different people, and messages, phone calls, and that was lovely.
So you're still living on your own?
I am still living on my own, and I'm very lucky that I'm able to survive with the help of family and friends, and especially Alison, Jenny and Jessica, and I've got a gardener man who does the mowing, and the house cleaning lady, and that's all very fine.
There's been some additions to your extensive family since we last filmed.
Since we last filmed, we've had a great-great-granddaughter and now a second great-granddaughter. So that was lovely to see them.
I know it's been difficult with COVID, but you've been able to keep up with a lot of organisations.
Oh yes, I'll be able to go to the Ringwood Field Natural Club and meet friends there, and also the Australian Plant Society, which now meets in East Ringwood, and that's good to keep in touch with the friends there. And until recently, I've been going down to the Warrandyte State Park to help with the propagating plants there to be put back into the reserve.